American wants to build a nuclear power plant in 10 or 20 years, and they want me to pay for it now?
That's right.
Well, I'll just take my business elsewhere.
Sorry, we're a monopoly. What we say goes.
I've heard nuclear power is more expensive than other sources.
Yes it is.
And I've heard there's no plan for how to dispose of nuclear waste.
We're looking at shooting it into the sun.
Well, I'm not going to sit back and let you make bad decisions with my money.
We're betting you will.
Stop Mid-American's power grab. Call your legislators today. 281-3371. 281-3371.
Paid for by Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Located in the heart of Beaverdale, Tally's offers speedy and affordable rooftop lunch, catering for events both large and small, innovative cuisine, as well as vegetarian and gluten-free menus. Come to Tally's for live music, dry-aged steaks, Sunday brunch, and all-you-can-eat ribs every Monday night. Tally's Restaurant, Bar, and Catering at 2712 Beaver Avenue. Call 279-2067. That's 279-2067.
It's time to think about upgrading the efficiency of your furnace and air conditioner. Leonard Tinker Heating and Cooling has provided honest, competent service for over 20 years. Whether it's your home or business, for repair work or to install a more energy-efficient furnace or air conditioner, call Leonard Tinker at 263-0422. That's 263-0422. For honest, competent heating and cooling service, call Leonard Tinker at 263-0422.
I love driving to Newton to see the races.
Me too, but I only have to drive across town.
You live in Newton?
Yep, Newton's got small town charm and it's close to Des Moines. I love the safe, friendly neighborhoods and family-owned businesses. And Newton's wind energy industry is really taking off.
How'd you find your home?
Dan Kelly with First Choice Realty. And Dan helped me find my office too.
Next time, instead of just speeding by, I'll stop in and check out Newton.
Why don't you check out Newton? Call Dan Kelly at 641-521-9260 or Dan Kelly at mchsi.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Tiptoe through the window, all the windows, that is where I'll be. Come tiptoe through the tulips with me. Oh, tiptoe from the garden, by the garden.
Okay, anybody who's maybe 40 or over knows who that is. That's Tiny Tim, of course, and Tiny Tim, famous for Tiptoe Through the Tulips, and just a very unique person. Probably more credit to him for popularizing the ukulele than anyone I know. Yeah, and we'll learn it here someday, won't we?
That's right, Ed.
Actually, my bike is learning how to play the ukulele. This is not my instrument. I do not need another instrument. I need another instrument like I need a hole in the head, but bike, you have at it, and when you can learn to play and sing like Tiny Tim, we're definitely going to take that show on the road.
I don't know about the singing, but I do know I need to work on my finger work a little bit.
All right. Okay. I'm still trying to get a visual on that. And failing dismally. Hey, I want to thank the Sierra Club and Physicians for Social Responsibility for sponsoring the Fallon Forum. I want to thank Gateway Market for helping to sponsor this segment. And I want to thank Adam Mason, who's going to join us in a little bit. We're going to talk about issues relevant to the thing I want to kick this conversation off with, and that's Wall Street's big banks. Now, again, a lot of us have been saying for a long time, if a bank is too big to fail, then that bank is too big. And Robert Reich, former Secretary of Labor under Bill Clinton, has been saying that as well. He's been on the show before, in fact, saying that. And he said it very, very pointedly in a column published today. And shared some information that, at least for me, was new. And I'll reference some of his comments here. Again, he mentions TARP, the Troubled Assets Relief Program. Folks remember TARP back in 2008. It was needed because the banks were going to fail and take the entire economy down with it. And so we did that, and it was announced just recently, of course, that TARP is finished. All the issues are taken care of. The money's been either spent or repaid, and the federal government will soon be completing the sale of the remaining shares that it owns of these banks, and of course also of General Motors, because that was part of a similar effort. But Wright points out it's not really over. Of course, it's not over because we haven't heard a fat lady sing yet, or Tiny Tim for that matter. But now, this is the interesting part, and this is the troubling part. The biggest Wall Street banks, as Reich points out, are now far bigger than they were 4 years ago. And that's, again, 4 years ago, they were considered too big to fail. So they're even too bigger to fail. Now, the five largest banks, and just to put that in some perspective, they have almost 44% of all U.S. bank deposits. And that's despite the Occupy movement and its limited success of encouraging people to move their money from national banks to local banks and local credit unions. And we had a lot of that happen. Here in Iowa, there was a significant amount of that movement occurring. But still, despite that, the five largest banks' control of U.S. bank deposits is now at 44%. And that's up from, 37% in 2007. That was the year before TARP. That was just before the crash. And a decade ago, 11 years ago, they were at 28%. So again, the big banks who were too big to fail keep getting bigger. And you have to wonder, well, what's the recipe for failure going to look like next time around? Okay. So Reich, I mean, there's probably lots of analysis you could conduct here, but I'll share Reich's point of view on it. He says they keep getting bigger because they can borrow more cheaply than smaller banks. I'm thinking, okay, so why can they borrow more cheaply than smaller banks? Volume, I was thinking, connections. I don't know. Well, Reich, I think, lays out a good reason. Because investors believe the government will bail them out if they get into trouble rather than force them into a form of bankruptcy. Well, and yeah, there's a really good precedent for that. That's exactly what happened before. So that belief itself, which is basically a guarantee by the federal government that if you fail, we will bail you out. That belief is enough to basically, it's worth billions to the banks because it makes them a less risky bet. So for others that want others, well, China, for example, but other entities, banks, whatnot, that might want to loan them money, they're going to do that instead of taking their chances on the smaller banks or credit unions because they have it's a smaller risk to them because the federal government. Again, we talk about crony capitalism or corporatism. I mean, what could be a better example of that than this, where the government basically is giving a major unfair competitive advantage to a handful of companies based on size, even though those banks in this case have a proven track record of negligence, irresponsibility, and feeding at the federal trough in a way that it's just astounding. Okay, so okay. And again, Wright points out the folks loaning to these banks are probably, their assessment that okay, if these banks fail, they'll get bailed out, so they're less of a risk. They're probably right to think that because the president, any president for that matter, will probably bail them out because they will not allow a $2 trillion bank to go under. And again, Wright points out that would threaten the whole economy. And again, I'd like to get different opinions on that because, again, maybe I don't understand the inner workings of this stuff enough. But it seems to me, at some point, you got to call their bluff. But again, that probably won't happen. If this happens again, if they fail again, and again, it looks to me like they're heading in that direction. If they fail again, then yeah, the federal government will probably be there with another bailout. And, maybe the Tea Party and Occupy movements and anybody else in between can get together at that point and say, hey, we have absolutely had enough. Again, I'm not sure about the Tea Party. I think they may have been co-opted by some of the very corporate interests that don't want any real changes to how banks are regulated. Okay, Wright goes on to point out, to make matters worse, with bigness comes more political clout. Yeah, no shock and amazement there. So the biggest banks on Wall Street that have already eviscerated parts of the Dodd-Frank law. And again, Dodd-Frank was never anything to get excited about. And again, I tend to like Barney Frank and, Chris Dodd. I've met both of them on several occasions. Like a lot of what they do, but I also have no doubt believing that the little voices whispering in their ear and also whispering with the power of money made it really clear that they weren't going to allow a law change that was going to be significant. Okay, so So again, the banks don't like many of the provisions in Dodd-Frank, including many of the limits on trading derivatives. Derivatives is something that my friend Andy Schaefer has tried to explain to me many times. I've even watched cute little cartoons on quantitative easing that have made it a little bit more comprehensible, but it's complicated. Basically, derivatives are essentially they're bets on bets about the prices of future assets. So you're betting on your bet. Yeah, I'm trying to think of how that works out at the racetrack. It's again, it should be illegal. So that means the banks will be back to make big, risky bets. Yeah, obviously, they're going to do it. So this Dodd-Frank bill, again, maybe it's done a few good things, but certainly it hasn't prevented the problem that we saw, again, from likely happening again. So, again, there's good news in the end of this, and I'm going to get to that. So, it's necessary, says Reich, to limit the bank size and break up the biggest. There's no alternative. And you say, well, I mean, we're inclined to say that's just not going to happen. They're too big. They've got too much political clout. And they do. But right now, it just seems there is reason, Reich says there's reason to think that Washington, D.C., that the federal government, folks in power, are beginning to sense the urgency of doing something right. Again, I will believe it when I see it, because nobody should underestimate the cunning, the monetary power, and the ability to do evil of these big banks. Sorry, I'll just call a spade, the ability to do evil. Okay, so a few months ago, Dan Tarullo, he's a governor of the Federal Reserve Board who specializes in bank regulation. He proposed capping the size of the bank's balance sheets at a fixed percentage of the U.S. economy. This is an idea I had not heard before. Basically, Tarullo says that this approach has the advantage of tying the limitation on growth of financial firms to the growth of the national economy, so that the economy can absorb the potential losses of these big banks. Okay, so that makes sense. Of course, just because it makes sense doesn't mean it will happen. So again, this guy is with the Fed, so with the Federal Reserve. So, and meanwhile, the Federal Reserve has put the big banks on notice that it will no longer allow them to buy up other banks. Okay, I'm not quite sure how that's working or what mechanism they have that will allow them to do that. A former Iowan mentioned in the story today, he's the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation board member. He's a member of that board, the FDIC. Thomas Honig. He's from Fort Madison originally. He's an independent. Not a Republican, not a Democrat, but he was chosen by Republicans because he has an independent perspective, or who knows why he was really chosen. That's what was said. But he is also pushing forth a plan to break up the big banks. Okay, so it's coming from a number of directions, from FDIC, from somebody on the Fed board, and Sandy Weil. This is a guy who created Citigroup, and really, by extension, the model of mega banking. Now, he's partly responsible for the problem, but he's also proposing that the big banks be busted up. And he says, quote, "I think that the earlier model was right for that time." Again, I don't know if I'd agree with that. But he goes on to say, quote, "I don't think it's right anymore." He said that on CNBC recently. So he said he thinks banks will be more profitable once broken up, and that the market would function better. Okay, I don't know if we need the banks to be any more profitable, but maybe if he means banking generally. Anyway, the bottom line is folks are talking about this. Again, Weil was one of the champions of bank deregulation. This guy pushed for the erasing of the laws that kept investment in commercial banks from merging, and that led to a big part of the problem. So, again, he's also proposing that the biggest banks be broken up, and that I'm repeating myself here, but Weil went on to say that when Citigroup got into trouble, he pointed out, it required $45 billion. So, he benefited, his company benefited from that, and he's now saying that maybe this needs to happen. So, it looks like the new Congress may be willing to pull the plug on the biggest banks. I'm going to believe that when I see it. Because, again, the banks have incredible financial and political clout. So, and again, not just among Republicans, okay? Among Democrats as well. Remember, the Dodd-Frank bill was a Democratic bill. and it did squat and even made the problem worse in some cases. So, in Congress, we've got Sherrod Brown from Ohio in the Senate, the U.S. Senate. He's a strong advocate for breaking up the banks. He's on the Senate Finance Committee, and of course, much to my delight, Elizabeth Warren elected in Massachusetts to the U.S. Senate, beating Scott Brown. Elizabeth Warren, a long history of consumer protection. And she is regarded by some as the scourge of Wall Street. Good for you, Elizabeth. And she will also be sitting on the Senate Banking Committee. So the timing seems right. Again, that's the Senate. Reich seems to have some optimism about the House. I think I'm not sure anything will go. I think it's good to feel some encouragement, but to be too optimistic, yeah, I wouldn't be pulling out the party hats just yet. So as Reich concludes in his column today, in other words, the timing is right. The oven is ready. All we need is another multi-billion-dollar banking loss due to bad bets, like J.P. Morgan Chase's $6 billion loss last year, and the biggest banks are cooked. Again, I don't quite share his enthusiasm and optimism, but I do share overall his take on the issue. And if that can happen, oh gosh, well, it'll be a good thing for the country. We'll see. All right, folks. We're going to talk more on these and related issues when Adam Mason joins us with Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement in a few minutes. Again, I want to thank Gateway Market for helping to sponsor this segment of our show. Gateway is at 20th and Woodland, right along ML King there in the Sherman Hill neighborhood. And one thing great about Gateway is that they're locally owned. So again, you don't see your money being shipped out of state. No big Wall Street investor is getting rich when you shop at Gateway. The prices are great. The sourcing is great. A lot of it's from local farms, local dairies, local producers. And again, while you're shopping there, check it out for breakfast, lunch, or supper as well. I think I mentioned a friend of mine and I had supper there the other day. 3-course meal, bottle of wine, 2 of us, $17 for the whole thing. It was great. Also, folks, they got a catering service. So do check them out at Woodland and 20th in the Sherman Hill neighborhood. That's Gateway Market. I'll be back in a minute.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
The dawn of a new era begins.
Well, good morning. This is the 7th of June in the Lord's year 2010, and this is day 1 of WebcastOneLive.com. We will begin with Max World Live with my special guest, Tom Coates. In just a minute, there's Tom. Wait. Howdy. And we will be live for the very first time on Webcast One Live. Someday we're going to look back on this and say, gosh, remember that old day in history? Wonder where Walter Cronkite was. He must have been around hanging there too. But actually, it's the beginning of Webcast One Live. And thank you for listening. Thanks, Rob Spearman, and everybody who's put together this project together. And we're ready to go live now. So thanks for listening to MaxWorldLive.com.
I can't tell you that it's going real well from time to time, but it is going.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Neighbors, folks. I want to thank Fighting Burrito for sponsoring this segment of our program. Tied in with the conversation we had based on Robert Reich's opinion piece in the first segment of the show, we're going to move on to a bunch of other State House issues, but we're trying to get somebody from the Attorney General's office involved with this conversation. Maybe even somebody with Chuck Grassley's office. All right, maybe you're familiar with the Attorney's General bank settlement, the effort that led to 25 billion rather being contributed by the banks to help out the folks who were affected by the bank's illegal behavior, more foreclosures and whatnot. Well, adding insult to injury, the consumer advocates are now complaining that the U.S. The lenders are getting off easy in this deal to settle charges that they wrongfully foreclosed. Again, a lot of us thought it should be about $750 billion. They settled for, 20 to $25 billion. And the IRS, it turns out, it's a really sweet deal for the big banks. The IRS is regarding the big banks' compensation to homeowners. Again, the money they're being required by law to pay back. Again, this isn't because they acted badly or made mistakes. They acted illegally. They broke the law. They broke multiple laws. And for that, they're getting a slap on the wrist. Again, $25 billion sounds like a lot to you and me. I could do a lot of things with $25 billion. But again, for them, it's a slap on the wrist. And not only did they just get a slap on the wrist, but apparently the IRS is saying that the bank's compensation to homeowners can be regarded as a cost of doing business. Therefore, it's tax deductible, fully tax deductible. Where's the outrage? I mean, Tom Miller's office should be furious about this, as Tom Miller chaired the 50 Attorneys General committee that came up with the settlement. He should be furious. I don't know. We're trying to get a response from him and his office on this, and we'll let you know when we do. But is anyone else furious about this, Adam?
Yeah. I tell you what, folks at CCI are mad as hell about this.
You guys are always mad as hell.
Well, there's a lot to be mad about, Ed. There's a lot to be mad about. You know that.
I know that.
I think one of the big things is that, as you mentioned, the settlement was pennies on the dollar to what they should have paid.
Really, yes.
And then since the settlement, since they've paid up that $25 billion, a lot of that money has just gone back to them in the form of short sales. It's not being used to underwrite or to write off underwater mortgages. It's not being used to help folks stay in their homes. No, it's being used for short sales, which is money that goes right back to the banks. They're writing checks to themselves.
Yeah, now it's tax deductible as well.
Tax deductible.
Yeah. I mean, and you guys were working on this at the outset of the commission that was set up by President Obama.
That's correct.
With Attorney General Tom Miller in charge. You guys were working on that before, and you were pointing out the donations that were coming in from big banks to Tom Miller and other key players.
That's right. You know, it was kind of a situation where President Obama launched the investigation kind of in the lead up to the elections in 2010.
Right.
We were tracking the entire process, excited to have Attorney General Tom Miller leading that investigation. But that's when we found out that, a lot of lawyers that he's connected to were representing big banks in this settlement and in other issues.
Yeah.
Which is a huge concern. And we were asking the question, wondering why they were getting off so easy.
Yeah. Well, this seems to be beyond the scope of the Iowa legislature. I don't know whether Congress can do anything, but we can certainly be talking about it and trying to make the make folks involved a little bit uncomfortable because they should be uncomfortable and they should be challenging this. And again, I don't understand tax law well enough to know whether the IRS has any choice, but it does seem it should offend people across the political spectrum that these banks are getting a tax deduction. It's fully tax deductible.
Right.
On money that they stole from homeowners that they're being required to pay back. Again, pennies on the dollar, and they're still getting a tax deduction on it.
Right.
Is there no justice, Gosh.
That's right.
All right, so we probably won't see that happening at the state capitol this year in terms of any legislative activity, but you guys are tracking a lot of stuff that's happening, including some, shall I call it, progress on the DNR's water quality initiative.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on at the Capitol. We're heading into the third week next week of the legislative session, but on water quality issues specifically, there's already been some good stuff happening. We've heard willingness on behalf of legislators from both parties to go back and look at the master matrix, which we believe is flawed.
From both parties.
So, there's actually Representative Eisenhart, Senator Dearden from here in Des Moines, Representative Eisenhart from Dubuque, just finished a statewide tour of 4 hearings. Hundreds of folks turned out. And basically, I was at the one in Ames last night. Over 100 people showed up.
Wow.
Everybody who testified wants more funding for natural resources. So the message is out there loud and clear.
So, and in today's news, of course, the discussion about more funding for natural resources centers on efforts to approve an additional portion. I think it's 3/8 of a penny for a sales tax.
Right.
And I have mixed feelings about that.
Well, that would fully fund the Iowa and Waterland legacy. That's the voter referendum that passed in 2010. The kicker here, though, is that on our state budget, right now the expenditure limit for the state budget is about $7.3 billion. Governor Branstad proposed a $6.5 billion budget. That leaves about $800 million of revenues that the state has that we could invest in natural resources, that we could invest in state agencies.
In other words, we don't need a sales tax to do it.
No.
And people forget how punitive sales taxes are on low-income and middle-income working people.
That's right.
There's even with the exemption for food and clothing, every study shows that sales tax hits those folks on tighter incomes much harder. And it's somewhat counterintuitive because you would think, well, if you're rich, you buy more, you pay more in sales tax. But no, as a low-income or middle-income person, a greater percentage of your income goes toward buying things that you need.
That's right. Yeah. There's only so much clothes that you can buy. There's only so much food, even though that's exempt, that you can buy. And that just takes up such a bigger portion of a low-income earner's income.
But even beyond that, just the other things you have to buy that aren't exempt.
Exactly.
It always adds up. So I'm a little disturbed that our friends in the environmental community are proposing a sales tax increase to support that. Again, I think we should be investing in the environment. I'm a little troubled too here in Polk County that it looks like some of the money that was approved in that referendum last fall, which again I supported, which I think is going to do good work. But there are folks already who are expressing concerns about some of that money not being used directly for preservation, conservation, for land acquisition, but for building parking lots and new buildings.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, I have my reservations about that. And you're right. I mean, there's an $800 million surplus. Why not dip into that? Why not target that for water quality needs?
Exactly. And, natural resources, Iowa's 47th in the country in funding its natural resources. Why not? And it's an area that's faced cuts over the last 4 years. So why not beef that up right now while we have the money?
Yeah. How much has it been cut? Any idea?
Well, starting in 2009, there was the 10% across the board cut.
Right,
Staffing levels at the DNR are right now less than they were in 2004.
Okay.
So, lower than they were 10 years ago for sure.
So, and in terms of, again, the DNR has proposed a water quality, an approach to improving water quality that the EPA has challenged, that that CCI and other citizens groups have challenged because it relies on voluntary compliance. And some of us feel that voluntary compliance is a code word for non-compliance.
Exactly.
And again, part of the problem is, of course, we don't have enough people staffing the DNR to assure that there is, true compliance.
That's correct. We've had these voluntary compliance programs for how long now? Quite a while. and nothing's getting better. We have 628 polluted waterways across Iowa. That's an increase of 22 waterways from 2 years ago that are now considered polluted and unsafe, for Iowans. So we want to see those cleaned up. Voluntary compliance isn't working. It's time for a little bit more stick and a little less carrot in our opinion.
I like that. A little less stick, a little more carrot.
That's right.
Said it backwards. A little less carrot, a little more stick.
There we go.
Okay.
that's yeah.
Folks, if you'd like to join the conversation, Adam Mason is my guest here on the Fallon Forum. He's with Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement. You can join the conversation at 244-0077, 244-0077, or toll free. Stick an 855 in front of that, 244-0077. And if you're still using an old-fashioned phone, you won't be charged. Anyway, I don't know how many people are still doing that. But give us a buzz if you'd like to join the conversation. We're talking water quality and then more broadly, the range of issues being discussed at the Iowa State Capitol from the perspective of citizen activists who are on the front lines, who are trying to do their best to make sure that the best legislation comes our way. So, Adam, beyond the water quality issue, what other issues are you tracking?
Sure. Well, there's some big ticket items. We can talk about that in a minute, but I'd like to talk about a small bill real quick.
All right.
It's kind of disguised as a technical change proposed by the Department of Natural Resources that would change publication notices for NPDES permits.
From who?
For NPDES, National Pollutant Discharge Permits.
Yes.
And right now what the DNR is proposing is to streamline how public notice is given about these permits.
Streamlining meaning reducing?
Exactly. What they want to do is basically remove the need to publicize anytime somebody applies for a stormwater discharge permit. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, a lot of times when factory farms are building and there's any big construction that's going to basically move more than an acre's worth of dirt, there's the potential for runoff.
Right.
And
probability of runoff.
Exactly. Say. And so whenever they're doing that construction, you have to have one of these stormwater discharge permits. Yeah. You have to have public notice, usually in your local newspaper. Well, the DNR is saying that it's burdensome to people who apply for those permits to have to wait a day or at most a week, in some of our small communities where you have a weekly newspaper. Unfortunately, from our perspective, that's how a lot of folks end up finding out about a factory farm building in their community.
Right.
And so removing the need to notify folks through public notice just does not make sense. This is a public deal. We want to see public notification.
So, and their argument is that it slows down progress.
Exactly.
But now, I think there could be an intelligent argument, a discussion at any rate, about the appropriate means of informing the public. Newspapers aren't what they used to be. Online media is growing in terms of its influence. I mean, more and more people are getting their news online. Is there any discussion about trying to use online resources as a source for publicizing the need for a permit?
That's a great point, Ed. That was raised at the subcommittee we were at on Wednesday, and our concern there is that out in rural Iowa, where one of the concerns was that it's a burden to wait a week to have this in the local newspaper, where your residents are going to be traditionally a little bit older and aging, definitely, that they're not as savvy on the internet, and that one would have to seek out actually signing up for a DNR listserv to be notified, and then you would officially be notified of every stormwater discharge permit in the state.
Good point.
So we definitely need to go back and look at it. I think that's a great reason to continue this discussion, but not to move forward quite yet on this plan.
Who's pushing for the change to eliminate the notification?
It's a technical bill proposed by the DNR. That
Okay.
So they seem to be responding to industry. Other supporters were the League of Cities.
I mean, come on, under the auspices of Governor Branstad, the DNR has really become just a wing of the Farm Bureau.
We would agree 100%. Definitely. The nutrient management strategy is a perfect example of that, where Farm Bureau wrote it.
Right. Okay. So beyond that,
there's some big ticket items that we're following. Medicaid expansion is a great deal for Iowans. It's going to save the state money. It's going to cover more Iowans under Medicaid, and so we want to see that. It's going to be a big deal next week up at the Capitol. Of course. We want to. It's exciting. On yesterday, a very. I know it's an issue that's near and dear to you. Clean elections.
Right.
The clean elections bill dropped in the state Senate.
Dropped.
Yeah. It was introduced. Yes.
Okay. And what does it do this time? I mean, it's a changing. there's always adjustments to the strategy on how we get money out of politics.
That's right. And we've been coming at it in three different directions. Obviously, we need to have full transparency of where money's coming from. Second, we need campaign contribution limits here in Iowa. We don't have any right now. It's kind of the wild, wild west as far as campaign contributions is concerned. And the third is clean elections. We want voluntary public financing. That's been under attack at the Supreme Court under recent years, but this is still a voluntary program where you have to show support. We're going to go through the committee process to try and find out what's going to work best for legislators. There's proposals that are in New York and Connecticut where you can still raise contributions of up to $100 from your own constituents who live in your district that are then matched by public funds. There's also
That's not a bad idea.
No, it's not at all. It does.
It's kind of a modified version of what's in Maine and Arizona.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The other way to keep the Maine and Arizona proposals constitutional is to simply have second and third rounds of qualifying contributions where you're going out just taking those $5 contributions.
I got to go to a break, Adam, but if you can stick around, I'd like to ask you if the change in leadership at the Senate bodes well for any potential campaign finance reform legislation to actually, make it further through the process, maybe even pass. Folks, you're welcome to join the conversation on any issue relevant to the Iowa State Legislature this year. Wide open. We're at 244-0077 or toll free 855-244-0077. Adam Mason, my guest this segment and next segment of the program. I'd like to thank Fighting Burrito for sponsoring this segment of the show. Fighting Burrito is in Ames, of course, has been there a while. Just locating in Des Moines recently. The youthful, energetic owner Matthew Goodman, also on the Ames City Council, is decided to test his burritos out here in the Des Moines market, and they are being very well received. Again, very, very affordable. The cool thing about Fighting Burrito is you build your own. Lots of options, and you can kind of, just create what you want from all the many, many options available. So check them out, folks. They're in the Nationwide building on 13th Street, just south of Locust, between Locust and Walnut in downtown Des Moines. That's Fighting Burrito. Join the fight, and I'll be back in a minute.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Hey folks, it's Ed Fallon. I want to tell you about saving energy and saving money. Tim Reynolds with Reynolds Energy Solutions will give you a comprehensive energy audit that will cost you nothing. And Tim will identify the many ways in which you can reduce energy use while saving money. Now, I had Tim over for an audit last month, and I was amazed, I tell you, at how much energy was going through the roof, out the windows, the back door. You get it. So before the cold winds of winter really blow hard, give Tim a call at 802-2801. That's 802-2801. I'm
a burrito.
I'm a Fighting Burrito, full of fresh ingredients prepared before your very eyes.
I don't have eyes.
I have over 28 options and 268 million combinations, including Rizzo for vegetarians.
I can take my meat off and call myself vegetarian.
Put that back on. The Fighting Burrito is locally owned.
I'm owned by some big corporation somewhere. Say, you want to go on a date?
No thanks. I'm seeing a quesadilla.
The Fighting Burrito online, fightingburrito.com. Join the fight.
Since 1994, Sid's Catering has graced Des Moines area events with quality service and rave reviews. Owner Sid Cohn's culinary career began with a Northeast Iowa vacation home for international clientele. Sid earned a Bachelor of Science in Hotel Restaurant Management and was the assistant clubhouse manager at Des Moines Golf and Country Club. Sid has a passion for fresh, local products and offers a wide range of options, including vegan, gluten-free, and ethnic. Mention the Fallon Forum when you book your breakfast or lunch event and get 10% off. Contact Sid's Catering at 208-2091. That's Sid's Catering at 208-2091. On March 28th, Equal Justice After Hours is Iowa Legal Aid's annual fundraiser that helps provide access to justice for low-income Iowans. The event includes a reception and program at the Temple for the Performing Arts in Des Moines. It also includes remarks by Georgetown University law professor Peter Edelman and the induction of Robert Oberbelly into the Iowa Legal Aid Hall of Fame. Tickets start at $50 and sponsorship opportunities are available. Contact Terry Bennett at tbennett@iowalaw.org. That's tbennett@iowalaw.org.
Nestled in the heart of downtown, Ritual Cafe is one of Des Moines' most unique places, offering a wide variety of coffee and tea. Ritual Cafe also serves the only all-vegetarian menu in town. And Ritual Cafe is a cultural hub for artists and musicians, with a performance stage hosting local, national, and international talent. Make Ritual Cafe a part of your daily ritual. on 13th Street between Locust and Grand in downtown Des Moines. And check out ritualcafe.com.
Community CPA is the 15th largest CPA firm in Iowa, providing audit, tax, and accounting services. Community CPA specializes in international tax treaty and double taxation avoidance among countries and states. 9 dedicated, experienced, hardworking staff are the company's foundation, and their compassion towards every client is the secret behind Community CPA's success. At Community CPA, you can expect quality service year-round. Call 288-3188. Community CPA, 3816 Ingersoll. Experience the difference.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Welcome back to the Fallon Forum. That's Max Wellman bringing us back. Max, he's got his trio has a couple great concerts planned on Valentine's Day, 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. I'm going to have to remind myself where those are at, but right here somewhere in downtown Des Moines. Adam, you doing anything on Valentine's Day?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm not asking you out, right?
Oh, that's okay.
I know you've got a wonderful wife. And I'm thinking Max Wellman's concert might be a great place for you.
There you go. I'll put it on the calendar.
Okay. This segment of our show sponsored by Community CPA, and go back to our conversation with Adam here. But I do want to something I want to talk about at some point next week is Walmart, who claim to be planning to add jobs for veterans and to buying more U.S. products. Again, I think it's because they're probably feeling some pressure. We're going to try to dig into that a bit. Have some guests on the show that can maybe shed some light on that matter. 244-0077, the number to call. I want to talk more about money in politics and how that might be different this year with different leadership in the Senate. But let's take a call first. Line 1, who's this? Frank?
Hey, Ed.
Hey, Frank, welcome to the show. This better be good.
Thank you. I'll try. I think I'm always good, ain't I? Hey, I wanted to mention to Adam, I heard a couple of things. He mentioned first off code word. Well, when I hear the word investment as a conservative, I hear taxation. Just so you know.
Sure. Well, that's the thing is we're not talking about raising taxes. We're talking about at current tax rates, which have not gone up in Iowa in a long time. What we're talking about is the economy's recovering. People have gone back to work. So our revenues in Iowa are coming in higher. We're not talking about raising taxes at all. What we're talking about is taking our revenues here in Iowa and reinvesting in public services, in state agencies like the DNR, like natural resources that have faced cuts over the last 4 years.
Is this an actual surplus, or is this some
Sure, yeah.
projected surplus?
No, it's an actual surplus, and what's great is Iowa's revenue estimating conference, they actually take a conservative view to estimating revenue, and so the surpluses actually could end up being higher in the long term.
Well, then the other thing I want to know, what exactly does the storm runoff drain permit cost?
I actually don't know what it costs.
I don't think it's very expensive.
It's not very expensive at all.
I remember dealing with that a bit when I was working on land use, urban sprawl. And, developers were required to get one of those as well.
You can answer this if you want. If you don't, I guess not. Do you personally eat pig yourself?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, if it was up to me...
But not pigtails. I don't eat pigtails.
Well, if it was up to me, nobody would be eating them, but that's a personal decision.
Pigs or pigtails?
Pigs.
Why? You don't believe in eating pig, Frank?
No, I don't eat swine, Ed. I'm in with the Arabs, Muslims.
What about shellfish?
No, I don't eat all that scavenger stuff.
Wow.
But
no lobster?
No.
Frank.
Here's the point. I mean, our rural communities are losing population. There's no debate and no argument about that.
That's right.
So corporate people are stepping in the void, and they're building these big, huge hog runoff lots. Well, like I said, if it was up to me, there would be no need to eat hogs, so there wouldn't be no need for a big, huge hog lot.
Frank,
right,
I think you need to join CCI, Frank. But anyway,
since we have them, there's people stepping into the void, which means taxes and revenues to the state. Now, if you give them a series of hoops to jump through, then that makes them go look at somebody else's state.
Well, here's the deal, Frank, is that they would still have to, under this DNR technical bill, they would still have to apply for the permits. It's simply just taking out the notice in the newspapers. To get back to what you were saying, the reason we have all these corporate hog lots in Iowa is because legislators changed basically laws in 1995 that allowed corporate ownership of livestock. That's when we saw family farmers being run out of business. That's when we saw the steep decline in our rural populations, and we're seeing our rural communities die.
Part of it. That may have been part of it. But
Big part of it, Frank. Trust me, I was there at the time.
I can remember hunting back in the late 80s, early 90s over around Adair.
Wait, you don't eat Miss Piggy, but you kill Bambi?
No, that was pheasant hunt. Quail,
pheasant. Okay, sorry.
Turkey, deer, that such. But the point being is there was house after house after house after house empty. Now, what was going on over there? There was no big corporations moving in over there. Secondly, there's no child wants to stay on these family farms anymore. They want to go to college. They want to get out of these rural communities. You know, it's like the debate between what come first, the chicken or the egg. I'm not saying that there's not some emphasis on corporations to move in these voids, but what's creating the void? I say it's people not wanting to stay on the family farm anymore.
Well, I think you'd be surprised, Frank. I want to just address that. You know, the reason that all of those houses were empty when you're out there hunting, that was a kind of a byproduct of the farm crisis of the 80s. And
They were also probably afraid of being shot by Frank.
That's right.
Frank, the Dick Cheney of Iowa.
But I think you'd be surprised, Frank. There are lots of younger people who want to have small farming operations now. You know, folks who are interested in building up local foods, who want to raise maybe 50, 100 hogs, who want to have 50, maybe 100 cattle, and market them locally, market them through Nyman Ranch.
Yes, Ed, that railroad crossing sign jumped out right in front of me. Darn thing. No, I don't know. I mean, I hear what you're saying.
Well, I think it's very good. I mean, there's a lot of folks who would love to make a life and a living in rural Iowa.
Yes,
I mean, it's not being vacated because people love the suburbs.
Listen, let me tell you a personal story. Let me indulge me here. I'll tell you a personal story. But back in the mid-'80s, I was working for a real good friend of mine doing some sodding. He decided he was going to turn his 40 acres into a sod farm one year, and we got into some serious laying down sod for 2 or 3 summers. There was a friend of his up the road that needed some help putting up hay. And he couldn't find anybody, and he come down, was talking to my friend. Of course, they were kind of neighbors, and my friend suggested my brother and I, who were working sod that summer, and we went up there and we helped the old boy put up sod. And this guy, or hay, this guy was in his 80s at the time, and this guy worked as hard as the two of us, and we were in our 30s. Okay, the moral to the story is the guy says, I can't get nobody. There's nobody I can get to do these type of sod and hay and summer-type jobs. Nobody wants to do this. And my other friend says, well, yeah, that's because they'd rather go up to Adventureland and work and look at the girls and smile and flirt with the girls. This was even back in the mid-'80s.
So that's the secret, Frank. We need more attractive young women in rural Iowa.
Well, sure, you might need to. Exactly.
But no, I think it's a good point. I can see that's a good point. There are folks who want the glamour of city life or the excitement, if you can call it that, of Adventureland. But I think that that's shallow and that's passing. And I think people are seeing more and more value. I mean, people are seeing more and more value in the need for a vital central city. Look at how much Des Moines has grown, the central part of Des Moines. And also, I mean, there are people moving back to rural Iowa. I mean, it's still struggling, but it is changing.
You're not considering. You're not considering this factor. And I don't mean to say this in the slightest bit of a racist point of view, so don't take it that way. Take it in the spirit I'm saying it.
Usually when somebody prefaces a remark like that...
Well, because you can get into trouble making racial commentary, but the vast majority of the farmers in rural Iowa are white, and the vast majority of rural farmers and white population in total are having less children. Less children staying on the family farm. There's just the farmers and people overall just aren't having as many kids.
Well, let me give Adam the final word on that, Frank. Then we'll leave you on hold because I know you're a Luddite and don't own a computer. But I do want to give Adam a chance to talk a little bit more about money and politics. But maybe a response. I mean, because you, Adam, work with a lot of folks from rural Iowa. I mean, CCI, a big part of your base is rural Iowans who
That's right.
are concerned about the shifting demographics and the shifting economics
That's
of rural
right.
Iowa.
You know, and I'll try and wrap this up and actually maybe hopefully segue. 80s, the farm crisis. A lot of farmers lost their family farms. The 90s, we opened the door for corporate-owned livestock. And so what we've seen over the last 30 years is this huge concentration of corporate ownership of both our lands and our livestock. And that's ultimately like what's helping cause our rural communities to die. Now, how have they been able to do that? Through wielding a lot of power at the State House and through elections. They do that through influencing elections with big money.
I mean, wealth will consolidate unless you've got a decent regulatory system and antitrust laws, ways of preventing monopolies. It'll happen whether it's in agriculture or, as we discussed earlier, in banking.
That's right.
It will happen unless we are vigilant and we make sure. I mean, because face it, for all the great qualities in humanity, greed is not one of them. But greed is very powerful, and it motivates individuals, and it certainly motivates individuals within the structure of a big corporation or even within government. And I mean, that to me is I'm going to keep coming back to this. What Richard Doak wrote in an article, in an opinion piece a couple of weeks ago, he challenges the Republican Party to become a progressive party, and he defines progressive very differently than we would often define liberal. And I think it's a very important distinction. It's one I've been trying to make for years. Let the Democrats, he says, have a liberal party that focuses on government solutions for most problems. A progressive party would have a different focus. It would advance reforms intended to let the public work its will against the oppression, read greed, of both big government and big business. And I think that's what we're seeing in rural Iowa, is greed has become the dominant force affecting rural Iowa. And you create a climate where people can earn a living, where they don't have to worry about their water quality, where they don't have to worry about hanging out their clothes because some big corporation is building a hog farm just upwind from them. I mean, I'm not making that up. I know people who have shared that very story with me.
That's right.
I've stayed at people's homes who have shared that very story with me, who now have to rely on air conditioning.
That's right.
Because they can't open their windows. Yeah, I would not live in a place where I could not open my windows. I get cleaner air here in the city than a lot of people do in rural Iowa. So, yeah, maybe folks want Adventureland. Maybe they want glamorous girls. Maybe they want excitement of a big city. But I think more and more people want, they love the beauty, the wholesomeness of rural communities, but they want it to be a place where they can actually enjoy the air, the water, have a good job, a good school. Yeah, my take on it, Adam.
That's right. I agree with you, Ed. I think that's exactly what we're looking for. Clean air, clean water, good jobs, and healthy rural communities. Folks, if they can make a living there, it's a great place to be.
So back to the issue of money in politics, because a lot of this comes down to money in politics. Years ago, Democrats were twice, I think, maybe three times, in the Iowa House and Iowa Senate, passed really good campaign finance reform legislation. A governor way back in the 80s named Branstad vetoed legislation, again, 2 or 3 times. So we always thought that when Democrats got control, and they had complete control under Culver, the governor's office, the House, the Senate, we thought there'd be something on campaign finance reform. At last, it didn't happen. I mean, nothing happened. Not even a limitation on the size of donations in Iowa elections. And so now, again, Groundstal was a big part of the problem. I mean,
yes.
Sorry, Mike, love you, but you were a big part of the problem. You learned how to play the money game, and you weren't going to allow anything to get in the way of that. But now we've got Pam Yoakum. I mean, Pam and I got elected the same year. There were 4 of us that year who didn't take any money from PACs. This is 1992, a little history lesson. 4 House members got elected without any PAC money. Myself, Pam Yoakum, and the next 2 are going to surprise you. Matt McCoy, who has absolutely learned how to play the money game, and even more surprising, Chris Rance, the former Republican Speaker of the House. Well, Chris and Matt kind of dissuaded themselves of the no PAC money thing, but Pam stuck with that. And for her entire time in the House, she never took a penny from a PAC. And I respected that. I don't know what her current status is regarding that in the Senate, but she's now the president of the Senate. She and Groundstal are co-equals, or they should be. That position is intended to be as powerful as majority leader. Is she going to be in a position where she can use her passion for campaign finance reform to push this issue forward?
I believe so. Senator Yoakum, or President Yoakum, has given every indication and, has continued to be very outspoken that this is one of the necessary fixes to what's wrong with our state government. And we've been fortunate enough that we've used the last 2 years, since Republicans have reclaimed the governor's office, reclaimed the state house, to really keep on educating legislators. And I think one of the takeaways from the 2012 elections is that we saw this huge influx of outside cash, more money spent on elections than we've ever seen before, and it's getting to be a sickness that everybody's tired of, not just voters, not just people who watch TV,
everybody's sick of it. Everybody, Republican and Democrat alike.
Exactly. The threat of these outside groups attacking you is just too much for politicians from both parties. And so there's more of a willingness, I think, to take a look, to sit down, kind of learn what these will do, to understand that clean elections doesn't benefit either one party. It benefits the voters of Iowa.
Well, Adam, a good summary on that issue. And again, keep us posted on the progress of that legislation.
We will do that.
And I assume it's starting in the Senate.
It's actually, there's a bill that's been introduced in both the House and Senate. In the Senate, it's starting as a committee bill, as a study bill. In the House, it was a House file introduced by Representative Bruce Hunter from here in Des Moines.
Bruce Hunter, good for him. We'll have to have Bruce back on the show. He was on the show when he was running for re-election. He and his opponent, Patty Bronco, both came on for a debate. A good opportunity. So, and again, we'll keep tracking that as well. Adam, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ed. It's always a pleasure.
If folks want to get in touch with CCI, what do they do?
You can email us at iowacci@iowacci.org or visit our website, www.iowacci.org.
All right, thank you. And folks, thanks for sticking around for the conversation. I want to thank Community CPA for sponsoring this segment of our show. Community CPA and Associates is located at 38th or so, 38th, 39th in Ingersoll. And the owner, Ying Sa, is a friend of mine who I've worked with for a long time. There are a lot of folks who've chosen Community CPA as their accounting firm because they do high-quality work. And this is the time of the year when you should be thinking about a really, really good accountant. And I can't think of a better place to go than Community CPA. So check them out, folks. You can access information about them online, communitycpa.com. And again, thank you for sticking around. Thanks for Webcast One Live for providing the studio. Thank you, Maddie Arrington, my producer. Thanks to all the folks who took the time to listen, and thanks to the one person who called in. Again, I always encourage callers, and the more people who call, I think the more diverse and more helpful conversations we have. I'll be back with you on Monday, but in the meantime, stick around. Bradshaw will be with you at 1:30. Have a great weekend.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershide.
I'm administrative manager.
I am the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
If we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, it's got to be, it's your home.
It's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're going to do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And